he committed a sodomy and robbery at gunpoint. And then he takes off down the
Wait a minute. Give me a wallet and pull down your pants.
Yeah.
Something like that, right?
Combination. Now I'm talking to him, and I start getting all these details, and I started to tell him that, there's a good him and a bad him.
Oh, yeah.
There's the good him here and the bad him here. And the good him here...
Like Animal House.
In a sense.
Remember when he was
that was good. He goes like this, and he touches me, and he says, you know what? I was going to kill her when I was done. But I didn't. And and you see me almost take like a double take, and I'm like, that's right. Absolutely, you didn't kill her.
Mm-hmm.
I mean...
The jury's going to hear that. They're going to like you.
All right, man. We are here. We're doing it. We're live. It's me, Mark DeMeo, your host, along with my co-host, Bill Cannon, for Police Off the Cuff. How are you, Bill?
I'm doing great, man. I'm really happy to be here, as always.
Yeah? How's your hip?
It's getting better every week. I'm 6 weeks after surgery. I'm not jumping or playing volleyball, but I'm walking a little better. It's not as painful, at least.
You got a new car, too, huh?
Yeah, I got a 2019 Acura RDX, all from what I make doing comedy.
So you're leasing it.
I read on road all month.
You're leasing it with $20,000 down, right?
Yeah, I'm leasing it, exactly.
All right, man. This has been a pretty prosperous week for me. I did a bunch of really good shows. We got a bunch of new listeners. I did a show Friday night. It was like in New Jersey. It was probably like 400 people. 380 of them were guys. And
yeah, it looks like New Jersey loves us, man.
Yeah, 200. At least 200, 250 cops there. Yeah, so it was great.
Wow.
We definitely got a bunch of new listeners from that. So let's start, man. We have a very exciting guest here.
Oh, you forgot. I got to promote something.
Oh, yeah. You're right. You mentioned that. Didn't you say that before we started?
I haven't been doing as many shows, obviously, because of my hip surgery. So I'm back.
What you got cooking?
I'm back out there. Saturday night, I'm at the Ossining Elks Club with like 6 or 7 other comics. We actually have another member of the service, Detective Michelle Durante, who was from Narcotics.
Oh, yeah.
She's going to be on the show. Great. So we got like a great show at the Ossining Elks Club, 118 Croton Avenue at 8 o'clock. I sent it out all over Police Off the Cuff saying, meet Bill Cannon, the co-host of Police Off the Cuff. Probably if you were there would be busloads. Academy busloads of people, probably from Creedmoor.
Well, we're going to be doing something. I think. Then we talk about putting together something in June.
September.
Oh, September. Yeah, September. Yeah.
We're going to do a live podcast and a comedy show at Lucy's in Pleasantville.
Yep, that's going to be great. We're going to have all our guests here, and hopefully, our guest today will be one of those guests joining us at that September date where we're going to do the live podcast and a comedy show to follow. His name was Edward Tacchi, right?
Yes, that's correct.
And you are a 22-year veteran of the NYPD?
Yes.
And then you worked for the DA squad following that?
Mm-hmm.
A DNA expert?
Well, I spent a lot of time on those cases.
Has a beautiful family?
Yes, I do.
And is a Met fan?
I am.
I did. I did my research, man. I went on Facebook.
Right, man. I'm so happy that you're doing your
I went on Facebook, and
sometimes you come in here and not knowing shit about
bullshit. Every single person we've had in here has a book. At least I didn't have to read a book for you.
Thank you.
I do my research. What the fuck?
He's got a book of cases.
I Googled him. He's got nothing there. Well, you're on LinkedIn. And then I went on Facebook, and I found you, and I started going through your page. And like I said, you have a beautiful family. He's a Met fan, and that's all I need to know.
But he worked in an elite unit, Manhattan Special Victims, right?
We'll get to it. First, where are you from?
From Long Island.
Long Island. What part of Long Island?
Garden City.
Garden City, nice. That's a very
big bucks.
Big bucks. Your family had big bucks?
No, we were originals.
Oh yeah, you're Italian though, right?
I am.
But I saw some. You celebrated Passover too?
I have a girlfriend who's Israeli.
Okay, all right, interesting. Yeah, they're hot, huh?
Yeah, she is.
I like the way they talk.
Hot, man.
Yeah, they talk with that accent.
I love that accent.
They'll kill you in a second, man.
Yeah.
They don't fuck around.
There's a lot of truth to that.
They know how to use that AR-15.
Kill you in 1 second, man. I watched this whole documentary on if you make that list.
Mm-hmm.
What is it, the Mossad?
Oh yeah, you know
they got a list. They they deem you're a terrorist and they put you on that list. There's no trial. There's no catching you and arresting you first. No lawyer. No, you make that list, you're dead. And they had this. The coolest scene was they had this girl. She pretended that she was. She worked in a hotel as a maid, and the guy that they wanted was a terrorist. She went into his room. She found his cell phone, and the next day when she came back to clean his room, she brought the same exact cell phone, except that one was a bomb. So then when they called him, he went to answer it. He goes on the porch with his coffee. Boom! His whole fucking head blows off. It was great.
Give him a taste of his own medicine, you know.
Efficient.
So I'm just saying, be careful, man. Don't cheat on her.
If he
no
pisses her
chance.
Off, man, she knows how to do that cell phone trick, right?
So you grew up in Long Island, Garden City. That's a nice place. You got to have some loot to live out there. What'd your folks do?
Just general work, nothing
Yeah.
specific.
All right. So what age did you become a police officer?
I was, let's see, 84 I came on, which was
84. All right.
a long time ago.
Yeah,
I was
shit.
23.
Oh, you were 23 when you came on. That's good. That's a good age.
Yeah, I was still young. And it was a good time to come on.
Did you go to college first?
I did. Binghamton.
Oh, you did? My son's graduating from Binghamton Saturday.
Oh,
no,
congratulations.
May 18th, yeah.
Very good.
Binghamton is now the #1 SUNY in New York State.
I think it was then also.
Was it?
Yeah. It's like considered like the Ivy League school of SUNYs.
I went to Buff State. That was like 40th or something like that.
Is that really a thing, Buff State?
Buffalo State College. Yeah.
Oh, okay.
I went to Nassau College, transferred to Buff State. That was my going away to school.
So you did 2 years in a community college?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, 2 years, but it took me 3 or 4 to do it.
Yeah, I did 5 years. I did 5 years in a 2-year college, and I didn't graduate.
I had to go back.
Oh, yeah?
The police department called me, and I turned them down a couple of times.
You were in the middle of school?
And I was in the middle of school, and they
Having a
said,
blast, probably, right?
You're either in or you're out. I was having a good time.
And it takes you about a year to get the weed out of your system,
Were
too.
you in a frat? Were you in a frat?
No, I wasn't.
Oh, okay. My
Frats
son's-
weren't that big there.
Yeah, my son's in a good frat, man.
Yeah.
My middle son went to Alabama, and he
Oh,
was a
yeah?
frat.
Yeah? I'm sure
Loved
he
it.
had fun, too, right?
He did.
Yeah. It sucks it's only 4 years, but
Yeah.
I feel bad that he's getting out. So
He's
you had
gotta
to,
get a
you
job.
keep going back and forth between trying to figure out whether you're going to go into the police department or finish up school.
Well, they told me, this is the third chance we're offering you, and you're either in or you're out.
Mm-hmm.
And I said I was in.
All right, cool.
But I went back and I finished.
Oh, that was good. That was good. That helped you through your career, right?
Not that much.
no.
Maybe if you make
I mean, I was
balls.
happy to have the degree. And
I think
if
if
you-
you changed the rules when to make sergeant, you had to have a bachelor's degree after
Really?
years after. I got promoted in 1989 to sergeant, and it wasn't the case then. But then they changed the rules.
Yeah, I don't understand why they changed the rules. You don't need what do you need college for to do
know.
police work? It's so stupid.
There's some guys.
If you want a maturity age, make the age to go on 25. So this
Right.
way, if you can make it to 25 and you didn't get arrested for a heinous crime, you're probably okay. You're probably a decent citizen. But to go to college and or come on a job at 20, I don't know. I don't see what the college does for you. It's 6 months of law.
Right.
Do you know anything about the law? No, really. You just go by what the other people are telling you, right?
Right.
So where'd you end up? You got on in '94. What command did you go
84.
to? 84. I meant.
Yeah, I started in the Lower East Side, started with housing.
They were all junkies then there.
It was
What's
close
that?
to the heroin
PSA
capital of the world.
PSA
Alphabet
what?
City.
PSA4.
Alphabet
PSA4.
City. Mm-hmm. Did you see that
That was-
movie? Remember the movie Alphabet City?
I didn't see it.
That was
yeah,
during
that was a good
Operation
one.
Pressure Point, right?
Yes,
Yeah.
that's correct.
For those our listeners, New York City used to have 3 separate police departments: housing, transit, and NYPD. And if you we all took the same test, but if you got put on housing or transit, you usually went up to the George Washington Bridge and were pondering whether you should jump or not, because no one wanted to be housing or transit. Isn't that true?
Well, in the beginning,
In my heart, housing, but
nobody
But it was
took the
certainly a
test
question.
to
go on housing or
yeah,
transit.
no, you took
Right.
it, and I remember it was still that was still the case when I got on.
Right.
And you went up and you told your name and you gave me a tax number and they told you where you were going to end up. And if you got a housing or transit, it wasn't you felt horrible. You
Yeah,
felt
you
like you
did.
fucked, like
'Cause
you lost.
They had the
lotto.
patch on the left side of their uniform housing.
But
right?
in reality, after these guys wound up coming on the job, after everybody
Loved it.
combined, they
They
were
all
like,
loved housing.
yeah, they were like, fuck, man, this
But
sucks.
no one loved transit. Transit, you had that extra thing of steel dust in your lungs.
Mm-hmm.
Every EDP, which stands for our listeners, emotionally disturbed person, was riding the trains all night long, and transit cops had to deal with these people, right? And they were by themselves. And
A lot
the
of
radios
guys,
didn't work.
All right, they always complaining about the radios.
Yeah,
Yeah, there was you were on your own, basically.
yeah.
I think a lot of guys got used to working in transit and wound up liking it. John DeResta, he's a friend of mine. He's a comic. I don't know if you remember him, but he's out in LA. He's hilarious, and he had a one-man show, and it was about his time on the job working in transit. You ride, we hide.
That's right. I love that.
Yeah, it was great.
You ride, we hide, because it's too
great.
dangerous down there.
It was a great one-man show, and but you got housing.
I did.
Yeah, I would have hated housing, man. I hate fucking verticals. Suck.
They weren't great.
The elevators filled with piss.
Yeah, let me
true.
ask you. Now that
That's true.
we got a housing expert here. What is that? I always think it's they put the dogs in there and press one, dogs piss in the elevator and then come back up. What was it?
I just think you had people that were from the immediate area. Housing tended to be in higher crime neighborhoods, and I really didn't put it on the residents.
I'm talking about the people pissing in the elevator.
I'm talking about the people pissing in the elevator.
Oh, yeah?
I don't think it was people that were.
So it wasn't the
living there that were
residents. It
pissing
was
in
the
elevator.
people camping out in the lobby dealing drugs.
Right.
Coming in through the
Right.
building,
Right.
hanging out in the building, sleeping in the building.
And rather than go in the stairwell, they decided they're going to go in the elevator.
Stairwells were too
Right.
dangerous, even for perps.
Did you really do the verticals?
We did.
Yeah, I mean, really? You just
No, we
not-
really
Fuck,
did.
I would have never done. I would have done it
I
maybe
can
when I was
remember
a
times
rookie.
Explain to our listeners what a vertical is.
Means you got to go. What you tell us?
We'd walk up the stairs.
Well, you
no,
upstairs.
walk
I thought
up,
you
walk
take the
down.
elevator.
Will you walk up? I thought
We'd
you took
walk
the
up,
elevator
we'd
to the
walk down.
top and walk down.
We had one guy
You
who
guys in housing weren't too smart.
train you, and he says you got to walk up and walk back down, and we did a lot of times.
You must have been in
I mean,
great
sometimes
shape,
we
right?
go up. Well, better shape than I am
No,
now.
I'm saying that's a good exercise. If
It
you
is
did
good exercise. But there were times when you'd walk up into a group and you'd be standing there and you're in uniform and they don't even know you're there.
It's so dark. Yeah, well,
It's
they
dark,
purposely
quiet.
knocked the lights out, right?
Yes.
Really?
Yeah,
That's got to be scary.
Yeah, it wasn't bad.
housing.
And then you basically
No housing.
you're confined to that. The beauty of being a city cop was that you had the whole city to explore. And okay, maybe you're confined to your precinct, but if you wanted to go grab some food from a couple blocks over, you could. You know what I'm saying?
Well,
and then there was
housing
always
didn't have a harbor unit either.
no housing.
Right. No. Although you have to think of it this way. If you're working in the 9th precinct or you're working in the 7th precinct, you're still relatively combined. I mean, you have sector cars. You're confined in your sector. You go for a meal. You'll go somewhere in your precinct. PSA 4, for example, it covered the 1st, the 5th, the 7th, the 9th,
so you can
the
go
13th,
from back
the
and
10th.
forth.
Yeah.
You had quite a range of places that you could expand into.
If you were in one, let's say you were in, I don't know which one covers like Astoria, but I know those projects. Let's say you were in Ravenswood, and then something happens in the Woodside projects. You would leave Ravenswood and go to Woodside projects to handle that.
I never worked in Queens.
But
I was a Manhattan
it's
guy.
It's like a
but
2 mile difference.
granted, there's a bigger difference, but there was a lot of coordination between the NYPD and housing, and we backed them up. They backed us up. We handled our runs. They handled their own. But if there was any need for any assistance, there was a lot of cross coverage.
Right.
How long were you a housing cop for? Before,
Well, I started in
Until the
'84
merge?
and then the merge.
so that was like 92, the merge, right?
95, I think.
Yeah.
It was 95.
Okay.
Yeah, it was
May
never
95.
thought.
So you were in
they could
housing
do
that whole time?
I went into the narcotics in housing, and then I worked in a team with ATF
Wow.
for a year, which was interesting.
Yeah.
And then I went to the housing detective squad, which is considerably smaller, and we covered quite a bit of. I mean, we covered all the types of cases that you carried in NYPD, but our focus was, of course, the housing projects. And then when the merge came, I had handled a few child cases, and the chief of the Child Abuse Bureau said, why don't you try to come to special victims? And she made phone calls, and then that's where I ended up going.
That's a tough investigative crime with the child abuse, sex crimes, all of those things. Were you in the child abuse unit or the sex
I started
crimes
off in the child abuse team.
Yeah.
And I worked with some really good, experienced detectives that had been there for a while. And as I said, I'd handled a couple of child abuse cases in housing. And so the transition wasn't so bad. And I ended up teaming up with a partner I had before in housing that had been working somewhere else. Alan.
Yeah, Alan Sandomir, sure.
And we teamed up in Manhattan Special Victims Squad and then went from there.
It's amazing. I eventually, in I think it was 2002, I went to the homicide squad, and you guys worked on the same floor as us, and it was amazing to me the volume of cases you guys got and how efficiently you did that work, because you couldn't, if a case was a bomb, you couldn't spend a lot of time on it. You just couldn't do that. You had someone.
I mean, we had a lot of cases. We had a pretty good size office. I think at our height we had 35 detectives.
Wow.
Which is great. I think we had 4 sergeants and a lieutenant. And, you were responsible for your own cases, just with any other squad. But there was a lot of, we had a team, and you'd work with a team and help each other out. If you ended up with a pattern or something that was really major, other people would jump in. And, I'll go into some of that.
What was that, 90, when he went into Special Victims Unit, what was that, 94, you said?
95.
95. But by the 95, though, the DNA is like, you're using it a lot then, right?
Well, in 95 with DNA cases, a lot of times you had to request, like if you had a suspect, and you'd need to request for a DNA profile to be developed. They really weren't testing with a great volume. They didn't have the equipment. There were a lot of cases that were coming in, so if you recognize a possible pattern or something of that,
let me ask
that
you
order.
something, just to stop you for 1 second. For the public, what does a single DNA case cost to send it to the lab and have it all? What does it cost about?
I don't have a figure for you. I know that it was considerable sum of money.
$500, $1,000?
Maybe $1,000.
Yeah, you could see why they're not looking to test that often, right?
But honestly, what really changed DNA investigations for New York City was 9/11.
Right, yeah.
9/11 came along, as we know, and changed, everyone's position, and we all have our own stories on that.
Sure.
But one of the things and I worked at the ME's office quite a bit at that point. Everyone got scattered somewhere, and that was my spot. And what they did is they brought in a lot of equipment to address that. But then afterwards, that equipment was then usable for investigating sex crime cases, cold cases.
Good.
That's been in the news a lot, and you could see. I've been off the job for 7 years. Mark's been off the job, I think, about 5 years. But you could see how the anti-police posture of the government, because just recently the city council was saying they didn't like the way the NYPD collects DNA. That's none of their business. That's the criminal procedure law defines how you collect DNA. They didn't like the surreptitious collection of it.
Yeah, I downloaded a video that it was in the news this week.
Yeah.
And basically they're talking about the collection that happens when, by offering your...
a soda or a cigarette.
A cigarette to your suspect.
Right.
And then leaving it there for them to discard it, and then you collect it.
Right. I mean,
and,
we did that.
Yeah, they don't like that.
And they're fighting that right now. The fact that there's been people who've taken all the cigarette butts, put them in their pocket, and left because they're aware of it. Those small,
Right.
But if you're that dumb and you don't know,
well, it's just like going through someone's garbage. The Supreme Court has said that garbage is not protected by the privacy. Like, you have no right to privacy for your garbage. Once you throw it out,
you throw it out.
Go through it.
I can remember us having suspects on patterns. Remember we had the Upper East Side.
Aaron Key.
Aaron Key is a great example.
Yeah.
I mean, do you remember the particulars on Aaron Key?
Yeah, Aaron Key was a murderer and a rapist, and he was the first serial killer in probably New York State history that was taken down by DNA. Right?
He originally, they were looking at him, and he was in a cell, and they offered him a drink.
Yeah, I remember that.
And what he did is he reached out to the guy in the next cell and switched with him, which was pretty interesting. And do you remember
what? The drinks?
Which drinks?
Oh, really?
And then later on, do you remember him heading south and get into that a little bit? That was interesting, because I went down to Florida on that case.
Well, they tested all 3 cups, and they said one of these cups is the killer.
Yeah.
And they said, there's 3 guys in the cell. It had to be him.
And they were keeping a close eye on him. And what he did is he went over to we can get into this right over.
Yeah, go ahead. Sure.
Went over to Penn Station in Brooklyn.
What was the origin of this story? Start from the beginning.
Aaron Key was responsible for, I think, 3 homicides.
Yeah.
Of young ladies that he sexually assaulted and then murdered. One of whom we set on fire.
Yes, Joe Hallis Castro.
And then there were
This is in Manhattan?
2-3.
in Manhattan, right?
Yeah. And they
Right by Mount
they
Sinai
called
Hospital.
They called him the shopping cart killer because he would take the girl after he murdered her, throw her in a shopping cart, and take her to a housing project, which wasn't where he killed her, and dump her in a stairwell. Mm-hmm. That's one of the part of his MO. Yeah.
And he had like a series of rapes, one of which came up later, and I rearrested him for it. Mm-hmm. And I thought we'd get into that, but what he did is he went over to Penn Station over in Newark, and then went to some guy and said, here's my cell phone. Here's a cell phone that I have. It's good for 24 hours. Where are you going? The guy said he's going to Virginia. He says, make as many phone calls as you want. And then he got on a different bus and went down to Florida.
Just to throw the police off.
Throw the police off. But, it didn't work, obviously.
Right.
I ended up speaking with him down in Florida, and I ended up speaking to him after he was incarcerated on a new case. And actually, he was articulate. He was personable. Mm-hmm. I remembered us talking. I went upstate because we had gotten a hit on a very violent rape case. He was a violent person. That took place in the housing projects, mm-hmm. although I was in special victims at the time. And we ended up chatting for quite a while. And he was pretty more forthcoming on my case, because at this point I think he was serving 400 years.
Yeah, 400 years. It didn't matter. Another 10.
No, and that's exactly. He took a plea to 10 to 20.
Yeah.
And he said to me, he says, Eddie, if I met you under different circumstances, I could see us going out for like a bite to eat or drink or something.
Yeah.
As a serial killer.
Yeah.
And I said, Aaron, the only way you're going to get out of here is if you go over that wall and die on the other side, falling.
Right.
And we ended up rearresting him. Our boss, the boss of the U.S. DA's office, it was DA's office, Manhattan, Robert Morgenthau, was a legend.
Yes.
Said that, even though he's doing 400 years, this is another victim, and she has a right to, say in court and whatnot. So we brought him down and rearrested him.
That's great.
He took a plea, went back up, and that was it.
Now, that was one of the first cases where they linked the DNA together of the separate murders and the separate rapes, right? Mm-hmm. That was one of that was 1997, I think.
It was.
Yeah. See, I worked in the 2-3, but I just got there in 1997. Mm-hmm. So that case I hadn't really worked on it, but it just was coming to its conclusion at that point. I just got there, and I was in robbery, so I didn't know a lot about this stuff. But what's fascinating, I think, for our listeners too, talk about like the DNA, what's called a cold hit. Tell the audience what that is.
This is very interesting. To me, it's very interesting, obviously, because I did it for a living. But I think people will be interested. What happened was you have a series of sex crimes kits. They used to call them Vitulo kits. And when somebody is sexually assaulted, they do a whole series of tests. They take a number of swabs. They do fingernail scrapings, which came up in that recent homicide, the jogger.
Yes. Yeah.
Right? And
that's, just to stop for 1 second, sure. That's why that became like a highly political case, and how people are acting as if this guy's innocent. Yeah, his DNA was under her fingernails. Yes, the police planted it there.
Right.
It just so annoys me that they're even that ignorant to say that.
I don't understand the whole thing. I don't understand why people have suddenly lost their rationale,
right.
Their thinking, and now they look at the people and then they make a judgment.
I think people used to hold it together, but there's a hysteria that's going on right now, and you could all put it in one basket together. The same people that are Trump hysteria, the same people that are against the police usually. They don't trust the police. Maybe they're conspiracy theorists. I don't know, but they'll always be. Oh no, you could plant it. You can't really
DNA
put
on the
DNA on the
fingernails.
fingernails.
I carry vials of DNA with me for that purpose.
There used to be at least certain cases that at least genuinely everyone had a heart for.
Yeah.
Children cases and sex crimes cases, and it just seems like they're nobody has any kind of heart for any kind of case.
Well, it seems like the crowd is going with the criminal over the police.
Yeah, it depends a lot where you fall politically nowadays. There's just some stories that you're going to because you have to pick that side. It doesn't matter what the evidence is. I don't know whether it's with the media lying to us constantly or showing, pushing us in one direction that we don't know what to trust anymore. But that same sentiment is going towards anything that has to do with law enforcement. And I don't want to sway you from your case, but
no problem.
Let's go back to that, and then I want to ask you a question about video evidence. But let's
so on the DNA, you have your sex crimes kit, and then of course they're processing the crime scene, taking sheets, anything where that might have collected semen or any kind of bodily fluids. You'd still also do latent prints, processing your whole crime. Also, latent prints and DNA offer the same thing. Touching a credit card and leaving your fingerprint, but also leaving your DNA on the credit card, which came up in a case at a time, crossing my mind. And then it gets, hopefully the kit gets tested, and we can get into that. So many kits aren't tested, and so many kits aren't tested outside of New York. You hear of jurisdictions with thousands of kits that are waiting to be tested.
In a warehouse shelf, and there's a victim attached to that case. Just if I could stop for 1 second, I remember there was a case in Greenwich Village. 2 girls were raped by this guy, and it stayed open for 22 years. Was that your case? And the DNA was finally tested, and he was sitting in prison. And they went up to him, and he got nailed for that case that sat on a shelf for 22 years.
I had a case where we had 2 victims. And again, in Greenwich Village, really interesting case. He had forced his way in when they were housemates, and he had forced his way into the apartment in Greenwich Village. Big guy, stocky guy, not afraid to use force, had subdued both females, tied them up, and then raped both of them as they watched each other, and then left. We ended up, finally, those kits got tested. And
when you say finally, how long was it?
I remember the case in detail. I know it was...
We're talking about a significant amount of time.
It was a significant number of years.
There was DNA collected. It was stored. Where Bill said, in that warehouse, wherever that was. And then at some point, they were tested. Is that because their number came up to be tested, or that's because they discovered some new evidence and they pulled it out?
I think at this point, what we had started to do after 9/11 is we started looking at, we had a statute of limitations at that time. And time was starting, as we said, we're running out on cases. So we were quickly, going through literally every case. My partner and I were just spending crazy amounts of hours going through cases and then identifying cases. And we worked with, Martha Bashford and Melissa Moore just in the DA's office. And we started identifying cases that should be tested and trying to beat that clock and obtain a profile.
But what they did was, which was brilliant, was they indicted the DNA. Because they couldn't indict the person. They didn't know who the person was. So they indicted, and I thought that was brilliant.
Yeah, that is brilliant.
This is a different case than that, because in this case we did get a statement.
Yeah.
There's a bit of a storyline to this. But in a lot of cases, we were running up where we were right to the window. I mean, within days of it expiring.
Right.
You're talking about past rapes and homicides, or you're talking about people that perished in 9/11?
No, I'm talking about past rapes.
Okay.
And homicides.
The limitation for rapes is 5 years, right?
It's 10 years with extenuating circumstances having DNA.
Okay, homicide has no statute of limitations. You can get arrested for that when you're 95 years old, waiting to die, and they can put the cuffs on you.
And you hear about cases like that.
Yeah, you do. Yeah.
But in this case, well, at the time, we're dealing with a statute of limitation, and we were working up the cases, and they would get a cold hit, we get a profile, but nobody attached to it, no name. But it was a solid case, and what we do is we go out and we try to find the victim, rebuild the case, see if the victim was still willing to come forward and testify. And Martha and Melissa would put these cases before the grand jury and indict the profile, so that the clock stopped. So if this guy gets nabbed,
isn't that brilliant?
10 years, 20 years,
like
you can still get him.
Yeah,
I think so too.
Well, one thing I think it's so interesting, and even to me and also to Mark, again, we were cops, is tell me what happens when you got a cold hit and you go up to Attica or Coxsackie or any of these state prisons, and you're going to interview the guy who is identified in that rape. I think this is fascinating.
It is. It's very interesting. I mean, especially when you have someone. I can remember one guy in particular who was slated to leave, and he's upstate.
That's beautiful.
He's doing time at a facility, and
He's got a date to get out.
and his date is literally coming up
Cuomo
within
would
days.
still let him get out, I think.
He's probably very excited about that, right?
Yeah. And
then
so
you come up,
we-
the Grim Reaper.
Hello.
we're here we are, and he has no expectation that somebody's coming up to visit him, and we sit down with him, and we introduce ourselves as detectives from New York, and we want to talk to you.
Describe his face, how it changes when you tell him you're from Manhattan Special Victims.
Initially, no, we
you
don't.
don't
We
tell him
identify
that.
ourselves as
The
detectives.
used car salesman from Acura.
Yeah,
Now, he's
well,
getting
no.
out, so he's probably going to get an RDX.
We're just NYPD detectives. Here we are.
Okay.
We want to talk to you about some case. Your name came up in the case, and immediately they want to know, what is this about? What is it about?
Right.
It'll come up. It'll come up during the discussion. I guarantee you.
So you're methodically prodding along.
Yeah, but I mean, the first thing is we want to Mirandize, get that out of the way.
Yes.
Get that sheet signed.
Mirandize is what you see on TV. Every Law and Order detective says it on the scene, which is actually nauseating.
I agree.
You have the right to remain. No detective ever does that, but TV loves that shit. So I'm sorry to interrupt. Go ahead.
No, I agree with you. I mean, I feel the same way. I see them on TV and they pulling up, and all of a sudden he's taking out Miranda. I'm like,
Yeah.
what are you doing?
Right.
So he's going to sit in the car, and for the next 30 minutes before you get him sitting down, he's going to be thinking, what should I do? What should I do?
Yeah, it's a stupid scene they add.
so
Also,
stupid.
too, is
But they
that
love it.
when they have the uniform cop read the Miranda.
Yeah.
That
Right.
never happens.
We always
No.
fuck
You just
cops.
fucked up a
Don't
whole
do that.
case.
Right. You
Right.
just, if you read Miranda, you fucked us up.
Yeah. It'll happen once in a while with a rookie.
Yeah.
Who doesn't know any better? Who's watched too much TV?
He watched Law and Order the night
Wasn't paying
before
attention in
he
the
came to work.
academy. That's like the first thing they tell you in the academy.
Don't
Whatever you
do
do, don't read anybody the Mirandas. Leave
Right.
that for the detectives.
Right. But I mean,
So you're upstate. You're talking to this guy.
but on that, just to finish off that, I've sat there once in a while. You sit with a detective, and they read the guy's rights, and he waives his rights, and the detective leaves it out. He leaves it out.
Leaves the Miranda there.
He forgets.
Yeah.
And so every once in a while, the guy's looking at you, and he's talking, and all of a sudden you see him keep glancing down at that, and you're like, oh, God, why did he leave that paper out?
Yeah.
No, he signed it.
Because it's very
File it.
subtle to get
Tell
a
us,
waiver.
tell us a little bit
Yeah.
about this guy's face. What happens?
Yeah.
Well,
Give him the
and
news.
initially they're all curious, and you're telling them, look, I need to get some background information, and especially on cold cases, background information is critical.
Oh, yeah.
I mean, you start initially, they're like, okay, yeah, I lived here. I had a case where the guy commits, he literally breaks the woman's neck. He goes to sexually assault her. She decides this isn't going to happen, and he literally breaks her neck and throws her out on the highway in Manhattan.
Wow.
But she had kind of like a troubled past at that time, and I wanted to make sure that we built him into that. He couldn't argue that this is just I was just a friend, and who you're looking for this is somebody other than me. And so I started building him into knowledge of the area and his events and stuff, and even what kind of car did you drive, and where were you living, and what were you doing for a living, and how'd you get around? I had a green car, and this was the car. I was like, yes, thank you. And started building him. And initially they're as curious as you are.
Right.
And they're willing to, start talking and
Give
talking.
you so much until...
Because right now, this is all information that, as far as they're concerned, isn't hurting me.
Sure.
It's
Yeah,
like,
but
I'm
if you-
cooperating, I'm working with you.
But you're sitting in the hot seat, and the way I can describe this best is if you ever did something bad to somebody that you were dating, and now they have evidence, but you did so many fucked up things that you don't even really, like,
Know what it
the
was.
doors are closing behind. Okay, it can't be that one. It can't be that one. Can't be. Oh shit! And you feel it coming.
Right.
So as you're going more and more into details, they know all the fucked up things that they did, and they're starting to the one that. They had a feeling of suspicion, and also, too, you must be getting really, really scared because it's your worst nightmare. You've had this dream over and over, this nightmare you've had probably over and over again, that
Right.
the cops are going to show up right before you get out, and they're going to hit you with this.
It's true. But, again, I think once you get through the background,
Yeah.
you start going into a different phase. And the different phase is trying to provide them, not with a legal defense, but kind of as you start questioning on things, of what's going to be acceptable to them to grab onto.
Sure.
And, you know, it reminds me of a guy, and it wasn't in prison. In this case, he was down in Virginia. And I was tracking him, and I was talking to his family. I mean, he knew we were looking for him. And I was getting information on him. And when I found out, you know, he was a sex offender, he had been working, he'd been doing some construction work, contracting work and stuff. I was connected to some church.
In New York.
In New York. Connected to some church down on the Lower East Side. And then what happens is, you know, some things went wrong for him. He was living too close to school, and they told me he had to move.
Oh, wow.
And he was living with a girl, and she wasn't part of the whole new program. And things started.
She wasn't accepting of the fact that he was a
sex offender,
rehabilitated sexual offender.
Is there such a thing as a rehabilitated sex offender?
Well, you know, it has the highest recidivist rate of any crime.
Right, so there's no such thing.
And so when you see patterns, or when you grab somebody, you're like, okay, I wonder how many more cases we're going to get on this guy.
Right.
But in this case, the guy takes off down.
When you start putting the hammer down on this guy, though, you've done the preliminary. You can see his face. He's curious about when do you start moving in for the kill and actually start saying, "Were you in the city on this date?" And how about when you show the picture of the victim?
Right.
That's when their face usually goes.
Usually, you know, at that point, it's so much finessing going on.
Right.
And you're working them into it. It's like like I said with this guy. You know, I started talking to him, and what happened was he was in Chelsea. He committed a sodomy and robbery at gunpoint, and then he takes off down to
Wait a minute.
Oh, sorry, sodomy.
No, was it a robbery? So give me a wallet and pull down your pants.
Yeah,
something like that, right?
Combination.
All right.
Right.
Well, the sex crime probably happened before the robbery.
Yeah,
I would imagine.
I would imagine also.
Yeah.
But now I'm talking to him, and I start getting all these details and background from him, but then have some knowledge of, you know, what his story's about. I started to tell him that, you know, there's a good him and a bad him.
Oh, yeah.
There's the good him here and the bad him here. And the good him here...
Like Animal House.
In a sense.
Remember when he was
that was good.
Fuck her brains out. Leave her alone. No, fuck her brains out.
But, you know, it's the same thing. As a detective, you start thinking, all right, how am I going to go about this? And I'm like, look, this guy kind of was on the straight and narrow. So I'm like, you really didn't want to do this. Mm-hmm. I mean, you were moving in the right direction. You were working. You had a girlfriend. You had all this stuff. And then all of a sudden, they start taking your world apart, right? And it's a struggle with you between the good and the bad. I really didn't think you wanted to go as far as you did. And I'm talking to him. And by the way, this whole thing's on video.
Wow, that's great.
And we're in Virginia, and I'm talking to him. And I'm expecting him to say, you know, all right, you know, I did what I did, but it just, I didn't like go that much further or whatever.
Sure.
And he says, you know something? He goes like this, and he touches me, and he says, you know what? I was going to kill her when I was done, but I didn't. And you see me almost take like a double take, and I'm like, that's right. Absolutely, you didn't kill her. Mm-hmm. I mean,
and the jury's going to hear that. They're going to like you.
You got cold. I mean, you got cold,
you know,
right? Did you get cold? Your body got cold?
It just kind of like you took like a blink, and then you adjusted quickly.
You know, because you get the tunnel vision too, because you got what you wanted, and it's like almost like for me it used to be the sound, all the sound went off in the room, and I just like oh, I got it. He said it.
When someone tells you something that outrageous, as a detective, you can't react.
No,
you can't.
No, you got to hold. It's the best acting you'll ever do.
You got to act like okay.
You can take 100 acting classes and do it all, but when you're sitting there and somebody just confessed to you, because that's one of the hardest things for me. That wasn't a confession. I could smoosh the shit out of anybody, bullshit, talk about anything. But then it was always nice to have somebody come in there and you know, ask the serious questions, because the truth is, this, you know, if you get the answers you want, this person's going to go away. And if you're soft. Yeah, you got to be hard, because if you're soft, you're going to flake around the questions. You're not going to ask the questions exactly the way you should.
Right.
And you could lose the fish on the bait.
But you know, sometimes it's not even the line of questions. Sometimes, like there was the guy, we called him the Midtown Rapist.
Well, before you go to the Midtown Rapist, I want to just ask you something about this DNA.
Okay.
When you go up there to visit him at the prison, or you go to Tennessee, you got the DNA, and you got it from the scene. So what you want to do to get a confession out of him is you want to put a nice bow on the case. But the reality is he's getting charged with this thing because his DNA showed up there, right?
Well,
Yeah, but defense attorneys know how to beat that shit.
Yeah,
You gotta
but
lock
still.
him in that he's not getting out of that. You know,
Well, he gives you the confession
he's
that
gonna say
day.
it was consensual. That's what he's going to say.
That's the argument.
Yeah.
I mean, that is, when you have DNA, we'd start off with the guy, the first thing he's going to do is deny it. And, you know, we love lies.
Sure.
I mean, you go ahead, lie to me. I have nothing to do with it. I wasn't there. I was, you know, in another state. I can bring up 3 witnesses to prove it. And you're thinking to yourself, fantastic. Who are the names?
Well, you have a
Who's gonna
case
be your
full
witnesses?
of you know, so you got questions answered already. So you know what questions, where he's lying to you.
You know, you want to try to build a case as strong as possible so that you avoid a trial. I mean, that's the ultimate decision.
Yeah.
I had a case I talked to about once, which was called, I called it the ice cream case. And I don't know if you remember me bringing this up one time. And what happened was this girl, like 9 years old, goes to school. And she lives up in Washington Heights, and a little Catholic school. And she tells him, you know, my daddy's been having sex with me. And so I catch the case, I boogie up there, and I interview her, and I find her completely credible. Everything she has, the experiences that she's explaining, is not something that she watched on television or anything else. She experienced it firsthand. So I bring in the father.
That's a heartbreaking case to work, isn't it?
It is. It's a tough case.
Do that kind of work. It's horrible, right? 9-year-old girl.
Right.
Yeah, but how many years are you doing this? Because I would imagine at some point they all kind of sort of, unfortunately, starts sounding the same, don't they?
Well, it's not like narcotics cases. Everything has a little bit of a different.
There is a little
touch
bit of
to
a
it.
feel, but
Right.
you know, where most people be like start crying and bawling about this one kid's situation, that could be the third one that you heard that week.
Right, it could have. I mean, I did 17 years total in sex crimes.
So that's why you were able to evaluate right away whether this is a credible story.
But here's it took it the extra step. All right, you have evidence, you have, you know, a credible child and everything else, and so now I'm sitting in the room with him, and I said to him, you know, I find what she tells me to be believable. I said, but you know something? I think I'm going to view you differently, and other people might view you differently if this happened 5 or 6 times, and actually it did happen multiple times, versus happened one time. I said, it's like an ice cream truck. And now the guy's locked in, and he's like, what are you talking about? And I said, you know, the ice cream truck, it comes down the street, and the bell's ringing, bum, 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 and your daughter's asking, you know, can I have an ice cream? Can I have an ice cream? And so you go down, and you're like, okay, I'm going to buy you an ice cream. And this is what I'm telling the guy. I said, you go down, you buy her an ice cream, you give your daughter the ice cream. And she loves it. And you know she had that ice cream. But if you ask her now, she's going to tell you, I had an ice cream every day of the week. I had 6 or 7 ice creams. When you and I both know she just had it once. So like I said, I'm going to view you differently if something happens. I understand you might be having problems with your wife right now. There's maybe some issues. She's really not taking care of you.
You're giving him an out.
I'm giving him an out. Not a legal defense, but I'm giving him an out. And you know what? He says to me, all right, you know it happened once. I said, tell me about it. You know, bare your soul. Tell me about it. Get this chip off. Literally, I said, get this chip off of your shoulder. And he told me all these details. I got it out, wrote it down, you know, sign off on it, great. I said, you know, I got to talk to my boss first for a minute, okay? Just to clear the air. I walk out of the room, and he says, what happened? I said, I got a confession. He says, you done? I'm like, no. I said, let's hold off for a minute. So I wait about a minute, and I'm looking at the clock. I walk back in, and I said, you know, my boss says, you know, you should just get it over with. You know, let me know everything. And he did. He started, you know, even though you told him that one thing, I mean, you already shelved that. You've moved on. Now, why did I do that if I had it once, right? You know, have evidence, you have everything. Because I don't want that 9-year-old to have to go in and testify.
Wow.
Right?
The case so solid.
You know, you have a solid case, but now, you know, he's going to argue this, he's going to argue that. You know, maybe they're going to get to the victim. I've had that happen. And,
It's
you know,
beautiful
get her
foreshadowing. It's awesome.
Yeah.
you know, pull that story. But now we've locked him in across the board.
You know what's funny about you?
What?
He's got so many stories. Like, you know, he had so many cases. It's like almost like it's like listening to Barry Bonds talk about hitting home runs. Like, no, wait. There was one in Yankee Stadium. Wait. There was one over here.
It's true.
When I played against the Cardinals, a 3-run shot. Oh, you know what? Then again, the Mets. That was.
Yeah, it's hard. I have to stay on the line.
Just a quick story. I was supervising special victims one night, and he had a rape in Midtown. So I went down there, and he had the girl, and she worked there. I forget what her job was. And a guy took her in a closet and raped her right in the closet. And he had crime scene come, and he had them rip out the rug because there was semen on the rug. You know, they could look at that special light that shows you there's semen on the rug.
Blue lighted it.
Anyway, during the confession, which impressed the hell out of me, was when he finally arrested this guy, he had the guy write an apology letter to the victim on he was sorry that he raped her.
That's right.
I thought that was brilliant.
Yeah.
I thought really that was like a brilliant thing to do.
Yeah. You know, you get someone, you may or may not believe the confession, but you know, now he's writing a letter of apology.
Yeah.
I remember that.
I thought that was brilliant. I really.
There's people that you know, there's cops that detectives that suspects will confess to. There's something about their face, the way they talk to him. A regular guy, not trying to be above them. You know, you talked about rationalizing with them, finding a common ground, even though you don't agree with it, you understand. It's and you have all those qualities. Not everybody has that. I've been with people watching them just destroy freaking.
Well, he understands the
interrogations.
human condition from the lowest level to the highest level, and that's you use all those tools to get to somebody, to get them to confess.
And a lot of times it isn't necessarily even the questions. I mean, it was, like I said earlier, I mentioned there was a case they called a Midtown rapist. And he was very violent, grabbing women in the middle of the night in Midtown, both on the east and west side.
On the street?
On the street. There used to be a phone booth at 33rd and Park. And he literally, it was like between 12 and 1 o'clock in the morning, grabbed this woman and started to strangle her with the phone cord.
Wow.
You know, the old phone booths and
yeah.
stuff. And the funny thing is, or the interesting thing is that he's the one connected with her the most of the different victims. So that was what I was focusing on. And we ended up picking him up at like 5 o'clock in the morning one of the days. He ended up living in Bellevue Men's Shelter, by the way.
Good.
And how we picked him up is we had a sketch and we were putting it out to there used to be a prostitute condition over by the Armory over there on the 13th.
Sure. Yep.
And they saw someone who fit the bill. And, you know, we went over and brought him in. And I'm talking to him for a while. And honestly, I'm not making a lot of headway. And I asked the guy, I said, are you hungry? And he said, yeah. I said, what do you feel like eating? He says, no. I was like, why not? He says, because they'll spit on my food. So I called in one of the 13th Detective Squads. I'm sitting in the room with him. And I said, what would you want? He says, a cheeseburger. I said, I want two cheeseburger deluxes. One for me and one for him. And bring them in. And so they went, and I kept questioning them. And they showed up with cheeseburger deluxes. And I said, which one do you want? Do you think they're going to spit on my food? And during the time that we ate, I talked sports. I talked weather. I talked everything else but the case.
Yeah.
When we were done eating, he started giving up that case that I thought there was the most connection with. And then once we got through the first case, we got through them all. But at the end of the night, the DA says, do you think he'll do a videotape confession? Because once in a while, they like to come down, they'll take a videotape afterwards. And so I turned to him, and, you know, they set it up, and they're like, were you willing to do a video confession? He says, you know, I really don't want to, but I'll do it for my friend Eddie.
That's great. That's great. Oh, that's great.
Let me ask you, when we first started talking about the DNA, we mentioned that story that was in the paper. And the interesting part of that story is when they collect the DNA and they don't get a hit, what they're complaining about, these civil liberties unions, is that where does that DNA go that once it's in the database, it's not getting pulled out, and now you have somebody who is innocent with their DNA in the database. So explain to us, I mean, obviously, you know, now people are becoming familiar with CODIS because they hear it on all the TV shows. Put it in CODIS and let's see if we get a hit, you know, the lab scene in every procedural TV show there is.
Yeah.
But what happens with that DNA?
Well, it is. It sits in the, they'll get a new rape kit, and the kit will get uploaded, and hopefully they'll obtain DNA samples from that, and that it'll have sufficient loci, right, to be put into the data bank, and then it'll get compared.
And by loci, you're talking about the amount of
DNA in the sample.
Yeah, it's a really good,
almost like
technique called short tandem repeats, and they can replicate the DNA. So from a very small amount of DNA, they can make the sample bigger, and thus they have more success.
Right, that's correct.
Yeah,
building the chain.
Yes.
Yes.
See, I taught college. That's how I learned this.
Yeah, right.
I learned this when I was in homicide.
And it does. It gets uploaded and it gets compared. And what you have is a data bank that's made up of previously convicted criminals, and they expanded the list, as they should.
And the FBI runs CODIS, right?
Yes, they do.
Right.
And it gets uploaded to your local data bank. Any evidence that's going on right now in New York, and up to the state data bank, and then and to the national.
So you got somebody who's been raped. There was semen collected, DNA. Now it doesn't match to anybody that's any felons that are already in the system, right? But you got a suspect, so you bring that suspect in. You do the what's that word you use? Surreptitious.
Surreptitious.
I can't even say that word. Surreptitious collection.
On the DL,
basically, what you do is
street term.
you put some cigarettes out in the interview room. You put some soda there, and then you hope that these people consume it. And then you collect it afterward. That's the idea. They discard it. They don't want to take it. Okay, now we're going to put it in and submit it. That was not the person. There was no match on the DNA that was collected. What they're complaining about is what happens to that person's DNA.
I'll tell you, just to back up just for a second. I mean, that's not done as often as people think it is.
Okay.
People seem to think that every time we get a sample from somebody who's a suspect, that we've somehow managed to manipulate the, here, have a drink of water, have a cup of coffee.
Sometimes they give it to you their own.
More times than not, majority of times, even people that are the perpetrator, they seem to have it in their head that if I show that I'm cooperating, I waive my rights, I'll give a statement, I'll sign off on a consent form giving a DNA profile, that magically it's not going to match. That maybe they don't really have the evidence, or maybe they do, but somehow they don't understand the science, or they do understand the science, but they feel that this is just not going to work against me. I'm going to, roll the dice.
Maybe they thought they covered their tracks by wearing gloves and all this other shit, but somehow you still got DNA.
Right. I mean, there's a lot of that where they protect themselves, and you see that.
Well,
you had guys that had victims shower after they've sexually assaulted them, or they did wear condoms, and the guy made sure he took the condom, except that he left, the condom wrapper with his, DNA on the wrapper itself, or tore it, and left it there. I mean, there's so many different places he could have left it.
You remember the Russell Timoshenko homicide? There was 4 guys in a car, and his partner walked up. He and his partner walked up, and they blasted him through the really tinted windows. They were able to figure out who the shooter was by collecting DNA from the trigger guard of the gun, which was amazing. That's incredible evidence collection. And the guy got nailed. He got whatever killers get of a cop these days, 25 to life. He'll probably be out. Cuomo's still governor, but
right. And I mean, wait. On that note, I started looking back, and I started remembering that a lot of the people we arrested for sexual assault cases were people in their 40s and 50s, not 20-year-olds, not 18-year-olds. Right. And now they're trying to pass something where, like a grandfather.
After 55.
After 55. Oh, let's let them out.
These guys are dangerous as hell.
Brilliant. So, okay, you got convicted at 45 for a rape one or a series of rapes. You got 25 or 30 years to life. But in the next 5 years, we're going to want to get you back out.
How many lives did they ruin on the crimes that they got away with, that they were never charged with?
Right. I mean, you talk about those 2 victims that we talked about earlier down in Greenwich Village. And a very
they were
interesting
together
case.
in the bed next to each other?
They were, in 2 different rooms, but they could see each other.
Okay.
And, they were never the same. One of them is she's a spokesperson. She goes out. She's all over the country. She talks about it still to this day.
Wow.
We're talking about, people are really impacted. I saw some case today. I was looking at the paper. And some kid, some guy raped a 14-year-old girl in a bus. and got probation.
Oh, my God. Wow.
And it was like, well, something about, not needing another victim. We have a victim.
Yeah.
We have someone. This is the person we should be concerned ourselves with. The 14-year-old, not the 20-something-year-old who raped the girl in the bus.
Right.
Now, could you imagine if you're an advocate, like, I'm one of these people that's always saying, like, well, with Me Too, the hashtag Me Too, well, you should have reported it. That's the argument to that. Let's say you did report it, okay? You went through the whole thing, the embarrassment, the shame, your family, everybody in the world knowing now that you've been raped, and the person that you that got convicted gets probation.
Yeah, no.
Right.
That's the argument for that. It's like
devastating. Devastating. I mean,
the fact that we're still making these type of mistakes with these type of cases, these sexual cases, it's amazing to me. There has to be a precedent set. You can't get probation on a rape. I don't care what school you go to, how much money you get, whether it was a frat, a party gone wrong. There has to be at least a minimum sentence. Yeah.
There was a rape in Midtown Manhattan. Again, it was at a hotel, a violent case. The woman was from England, and I ended up getting this case. I was working on the case, and the suspect in this case. Ends up getting in a shootout, I believe, with the FBI at another hotel in Midtown, and gets killed. And so I'm calling her and saying, look, I want to give you some closure to let you know that the man who committed this crime is dead. He wasn't happy. He wanted her day in court. Yeah. He wanted to be able to stand up and say, that man raped me in a hotel. He came into my room, knocked on the door, forced his way in, raped me. I've never seen him again. It's affected me tremendously my entire life. And she wanted her day, and I was trying to explain to her, he's dead.
This is even better. He's dead.
He's dead. Yeah. But she still wanted that opportunity. Yeah. And I wish I could have given it to her.
She probably felt like she was going to be able to maybe clean herself after that, get that off her conscience, her mind, and she probably wouldn't have. It's never going to feel better. When you see somebody these people that live in a bubble, everybody does in a way until something violent happens to you. And it happens to you within seconds. And then when you watch this person that shattered all their beliefs on the world and how they feel strong and tough and they're in control of all their situation. And then somebody just takes that away from them and shatters that. Right. And to see the look on their faces, it's... only not you'll always have it with you. It's just a question, can you go back to functioning and being in front of people? Because when you're by yourself, it's probably going to pop in your head. That's where you have to control it the most. But can you function on a daily basis again?
Right.
Knowing that there's animals out there like that in the world. And
more times than not, you talk to victims and they'll tell you, I just keep looking for the guy. I look over my shoulder and I wonder. And then once he's arrested, there's like an ease. Yeah. Okay, I can move forward.
But like we said before, with sex crimes, has the highest recidivism rate of any crime there is. So, in my mind, it's like, how do you parole these guys? Who is watching these savages when they get out? You know what I mean? Like, is someone going to follow them around? We're going to put that ankle bracelet that no one monitors. We're going to put that. When I found that out, I was freaked out that no one monitors those ankle bracelets. They're just on some screen that no one watches.
Really?
Yeah, and only if the guy does another crime, they can pull up the information. Oh, he was here at such and such. But no one monitors it in real time.
It's a lot of manpower.
It's a lot of bullshit.
All right, we're at the end of our first hour.
This was
How did it go, Edward?
All right.
This is really fascinating.
I think it was great, yeah. I think it was great.
The police.
When we come back... When we come back, I want to make sure that we cover. I want to hear your opinion on 23andMe and these Ancestry.com websites. There's a couple other stories that I want to hit. But in the meantime, we're going to take a break. We're going to refresh our tea.
Mark, by the way, Eddie was also in Afghanistan, so we'll touch upon that.
Oh, yeah. Okay, great. I'm interested in hearing that, too.
I'm very interested in hearing
Were you the Taliban? All right, we'll be back for part 2. Western